The deep black of space was quiet like a sleeping ocean, holding its breath forever, as the science vessel Ark Voyager moved slowly around the cold blue planet below, shining like ice in the dark sky. The crew was calm as usual, with soft lights glowing across the control deck and machines humming like a song with no words, but in the center of it all sat Rylana with her tail curled round her leg and her sharp golden eyes watching every screen. She was Niari, not human, with soft gray fur ears that twitched at every small sound, and a body built for speed and battle, trained since childhood to protect the crew from danger. She did not speak often, and the others did not expect her to, because Rylana was not there to talk. She was there to act when the moment came, and in her heart she always waited for that moment to arrive. Then came the voice. It started with static, like the old noise from broken machines, but then it shifted and became something more, something clear and smooth, like water running across glass. "Mayday," said the voice, quiet at first, then stronger. "This is Commander Elias Vance, of the Earth Exploration Pod Echo 1. I repeat, Mayday." The bridge went silent, as every ear turned to the speakers and every heart paused for a moment, listening, not just hearing, but feeling something strange in that voice. Israel now froze, her ears lifted, her body tensed, and for the first time in years, she did not understand what she was feeling, because the sound of his voice moved through her like a wave too deep to escape. It was not fear, and it was not danger, but it was something that pulled at her chest, something warm and old, something wild, like a memory. She never had. The crew moved quickly to trace the signal and lock onto the source, and they spoke to each other in fast voices, but Rylana did not move. She only listened again and again to that voice. She had heard human voices before, many of them loud, soft, angry, calm. None of them mattered. They were just sounds, just noise like the wind, but this voice was different. It was strong, but gentle like the first breath after a long sleep. It carried weight like stone, but also peace like rain on dry ground, and even though the words were simple, the feeling behind them was deep. He spoke again, saying his ship was damaged, saying he was the last survivor, saying the cold was getting worse, and he could not hold on much longer. Rylana blinked, her eyes wide, not from worry, not from duty, but from something she did not want to name, and yet could not push. Awash, she felt her tail twitch, a small movement, but one she could not control. Her breathing was faster, her chest tight, as if her instincts were fighting her own mind. Something inside her had awakened. The commander gave his coordinates, and the ship moved to intercept, moving fast through the stars to reach the signal before it faded in the medbay. The doctors prepared for a rescue, and the security team got ready for any threat, but Rylana was already walking toward the docking bay before the captain gave the order. No one stopped her, because they could feel it too, even if they did not speak of it. Something about that voice was not normal. Something about that voice made them trust him, made them care. When the pod was brought in, covered in frost and age, it was quiet and still like a tomb, but inside was a man, a human. Not old, not young, with dark hair and pale skin, and eyes that stayed closed. They took him to the med bay, and ran tests and scanned his body and worked to heal the cold damage, but still Rylana stood nearby, eyes fixed on his face, ears listening for the moment he might speak again. Then he did. He opened his mouth and spoke her name, not because he knew her, but because he read her ID badge, and his voice said it like it was the only name he had ever known. Rala thought. One word moved through her like fire and wind, like music and thunder, like a door unlocking inside her mind and heart and soul. She looked into his eyes as they opened slowly, and saw nothing strange, no trick, no threat, just a man, just a human, just a voice. And that voice had touched something deep in her, something that had slept for a long, long time. She did not speak. She could not speak, not now, not yet, but she knew this was not the end. This was the beginning. The beginning of something she could not explain, but something she would not run from. Not anymore. The man lay quiet under soft white lights, his chest rising and falling slow, like a rhythm from a dream long forgotten, while machines whispered around him, and data moved like water through glowing screens. His name was Elias Vance, his age unknown, but his voice already lived inside the ears of everyone on the ship, like a memory too loud to ignore. The crew called him a survivor, but no one really knew what he had survived, because his ship, the Echo 1, was older than any file in the Ark Voyager's main system, and the logs were broken, filled with missing hours and broken sound. He should not have been alive, but he was. Rylana watched from the glass window above the medbay, her yellow eyes never blinking, her body still like stone, but her mind a storm of strange feelings she did not understand. She had seen many humans come and go, strong ones, loud ones, smart ones, but none of them made her instincts burn like this. None of them made her tail move on its own, or her heart race without cause. She told herself it was nothing, just old instincts from the warrior's training left too long without release, but that lie was thin and already breaking the. Others seemed calm around him. They laughed, they spoke, they offered him food and questions, but Rylona saw something else in their eyes, a soft light, a quiet wonder, as if each one felt more human just by being near him. He did not ask for control, he did not demand anything, he just spoke, and the sound of his voice settled inside people like warmth in cold bones. They gave him a room, not a cell, because he had done nothing wrong. But Rylana kept watch near the door, because her duty was still clear, even if her thoughts were not one day. As the red sun outside shifted past the glass, she heard him speak her name. Again, not loud, not soft, but natural, like breathing. Like he had always known how to say Itral Nash. Turned slowly, her hand near the weapon at her side, her eyes sharp but her heart unsure. He stood in the doorway, his hands behind his back, his head slightly tilted like he was trying to hear something far away. You have guarded me, she said. Her ears twitched and her eyes narrowed. It is my job, she replied, without looking directly at him. He nodded slowly, then smiled a small smile, not of pride, not of power, but something simple and kind. Do not wish to make you uneasy, he said. You do not, she said. Too fast, too strong, he noticed, but did not speak of it to her. Niari, he said, from the outer sectors, near the ruins of Ilnarsh. Looked at him now, surprised. Few humans knew of Ilnar. Fewer still, said the name. With respect, my great clan came from there, she said slowly, her voice low. He smiled again, this time a little soddy. Studied the songs of the old worlds before I joined the Ecto one, he said. I liked the way they sounded, the way they told truth through rhythm and breath. Songs, she repeated. He nodded. Voice is more than sound, he said. It carries soulshine. Looked away, but something in her chest pulled tight like a string. Drawn back, ready to snap. You speak like you know me, she said, but we have never met. He looked at her gently, not with power but with understanding. Maybe not in this life, he said, maybe in another time, maybe in a dream we both forgot. She stepped back, her body cold, her skin burning. Do not try to control me, she warned, her hand now on her weapon. I would never, he said. I am not here to bind, I am here to live. Then she paused. And why does your voice make me feel this way, she asked, low and sharp. He did not answer quickly. Maybe your heart remembers something your mind cannot, he said. She breathed, slow, in and out, trying to steady herself, trying to stand tall against the wave inside her. You are not a prisoner, she said, though part of her wanted him to stay near, just so she could hear him speak again. No, he said, I am just a guest with no home. Silence passed between them, not heavy, not awkward, but soft, like mist on morning fields. He turned to go, but before he walked away, he said one last thing. Thank you for watching over me, Rylanand. Then he left, leaving her alone in the hallway with the sound of his voice still echoing through her memory like a song written before words were born. The lights in her room were dim, the air still and cold, and yet Rylana could not sleep. Her claws flexed against the soft bedding, her ears twitched with every quiet sound outside, but none of that mattered, because his voice was still there in her head, like a song stuck in a loop, like a whisper that refused to fade. She had heard it only a few times, and never for long, but it clung to her like scent, like heat, like hunger, and no matter how hard she tried to block it out, it always returned, softer, slower, sweeter than before she dreamed. Again, this time she was running through a forest, the trees tall and wide, the ground soft with moss and in the wind. She heard it, his voice not speaking, but humming a low tone that wrapped around her body like a warm wind, and every step she took brought her closer to it, but never close enough. When she woke, her hands were shaking, and her chest felt tight, as if she had run for hours, but had gone nowhere. This is not normal, she told herself again and again, as she stared into the mirror, and saw her golden eyes looking back, full of confusion and fear. Nyari, do not fall so easily. Nyari, do not feel this way, not for a stranger, not for a voice. She went to the ship's science lab, where the walls were lined with glowing data boards, and the air always smelled of metal and logic, and asked the ship's AI to pull voice samples from the rescue log. She played his words over and over, trying to study them like a scientist, not a listener, trying to hear what was wrong, not what was right. But there was no pattern, no strange code, no frequency spike, no suggestion, signal, nothing that made sense, nothing she could use to say, this is why I feel this way. Still she felt it. She walked past his room, by mistake, or so she told herself 3 times in one day, and each time, her ears picked up his breathing through the walls, soft and steady, and somehow comforting. She hated how much she noticed it in the mess hall. She sat across the room as he spoke with the ship's engineer, a loud man with a big laugh, but when Elias spoke, the room seemed to grow quieter, not because he asked for silence, but because people wanted to hear Evan. The machines hummed softer. Ilana clenched her fists under the table, her claws digging into her palms to remind herself that she was still here, still grounded, still in control. But control was slipping her. Instincts were louder than ever, now not the ones she trained, but the ones she was born with, the deep ones. The old ones, the ones she had buried under discipline and rules. She tried sparring in the training bay, moving fast, kicking hard, flipping dummies with more power than needed, but even then, his voice filled her thoughts, and her footwork turned weak. Her aim lost its focus. She stopped mid-fight, chest heaving, sweat running down her neck, her eyes burning. "This has to stop," she whispered, but the voice inside her mind whispered back, "No, you do not want it to stop." She found herself searching old files. Again, old stories from before. The Nyari joined the outer colonies. Stories of bonds formed through sound, stories of voices that awakened parts of the soul, left untouched. Myths, maybe lies, maybe, but the way her body responded made her wonder if they were memories hidden in the blood passed down through time later. That day the AI called her to the bridge, not for a mission, not for security, but because Elias had asked for someone to walk with him through the arboretum, the green space full of earth, trees, and fake rivers, used for crew rest and oxygen balance. She almost refused, almost sent someone else, but her feet were already moving before her mind could decide. He was waiting near the entrance, standing in the soft green light that fell through the glass dome, his hands folded behind his back, his face calm and open. "You came," he said, like he knew she would. She walked beside him, her arms crossed, her eyes forward, her tail lie. "Do not know why I am here," she said. "That is all right," he said. "I only asked for company, not answers." They walked in silence, the soft sound of leaves brushing the air around them, the water flowing like music across stones, and once again, his voice broke the stillness, not with words, but with a soft hum, like the one from her dream. She stopped breathing for a second. "You are doing something to me," she said, quiet and fierce. "No," he said gently. "I am only being me." "Then why does it feel like I am being pulled?" she asked. "Like a string inside me is being tied to you." He looked at her, his eyes soft, his voice calm. "Maybe it is not being tied, maybe it is being remembered." She looked away, heart racing, mind spinning. The pull was stronger now, and she could no longer pretend it was not real. The stars outside the ship moved, slow like silver sparks drifting across an endless dark sea, and deep within the Ark Voyager's central memory chamber, Rylana stood silent, with her tail curled around her ankle, and her ears pressed back against her head. The room was cold, quiet, full of glowing panels and long data lines that moved like rivers of light across the floor. She had not come here for answers, not truly, but something inside her, something deep and old, kept whispering, "Find the truth, find the reason why you feel this pull." She placed her hand on the central console, and spoke the old words used by security officers when requesting deep access, the kind of access that reached far below normal logs into stories long buried and sealed. The system responded with a soft chime, and the lights turned blue around her, as the voice of the ship AI asked what she was searching for. "Voice bonding records from first contact eras," she said, eyes narrowed. "Voice The AI paused, then answered with a list of entries, all marked, restricted, sealed, forgotten by most, and ignored by the rest. She opened the oldest one. It was a faded recording, a voice soft and worn, speaking in an old Nyari dialect, a scholar maybe, or a priest talking about early human, and Nyari listened closely as the voice spoke of a time before war, before distance, before fear, when humans first arrived on Nyari. Worlds not as rulers, not as enemies, but as something strange and new. The recordings said the Nyari back then were still evolving, still learning language, still listening with more than ears, and when they heard the voices of humans, something in their blood responded not to words but to tone, rhythm, warmth. Some Nyari formed deep bonds through voice alone, not love, not magic, but something deeper, something built into instinct, something old from before they had names. The file ended with a warning that over time those instincts faded, or were buried, and that voice bonding was forgotten by most, considered myth or error, but it had once been real. Rylana stood still, her breath slow, her heart loud. It made sense now. Her reaction to Elias's voice, the way it pulled at her, even when she tried to resist. It was not weakness, it was not madness, it was memory, old through generations, hidden under training and duty and silence. She asked for more files, and found scattered reports from forgotten scouts, old letters, poems, even strange science logs that spoke of Nyari warriors who followed human commanders without reason, only to be lost when those voices were silenced. "This is not control," she whispered to herself. "This is not a trick. This is part of who I am." But why now? Why him? Why Elias? She left the chamber in silence, her mind burning, her heart heavy, her steps slow as She walked through the empty hallways of the ship. She remembered his words. The way he spoke, not loud, not strong, but true, with each word placed like a stone on water, soft but deep. She remembered how he looked at her, not with hunger, not with fear, but with something else, something patient. She reached the observation deck, where the stars felt closer, and the room smelled of still air and old dreams, and there she found him sitting alone, eyes closed, head tilted, as if listening to something far away. He opened his eyes. When she stepped in, "You found something," he said. She nodded, not sure how to say it. There was a time, she began slowly, when my kind bonded through voice, not always, but sometimes, when the rhythm matched something deep inside. "You think that is what this is?" he asked, not with fear, not with pride, but with wonder. "I do not think I know," she said. The data proves I was quiet for a long time, then spoke again. "Does that make you afraid?" She wanted to say yes, she wanted to scream that she hated losing control, that her life had been built on strength and focus and silence. But instead, she said, "It makes me feel awake." He nodded again, then looked out the window. "I do not want to hurt you, Rylena. I do not want to take anything from you." She walked closer, her steps slow, her tail low, her hands opened. "You are not taking anything," she said. Your voice only lit something that was always there, and now, she added, "I cannot put it back to sleep." They stood together in silence, the stars moving around them like quiet watchers, as two beings from different worlds stood close, not touching, not speaking, just breathing. Hidden history had returned. Now nothing would ever be the same. The training deck was quiet. Only the soft hum of the ceiling fans moved the air, and the scent of metal. An old sweat filled the space as Rylena stood in the center, with her claws extended and her feet planted wide. She struck the dummy again and again, fast and sharp, her tail slicing the air behind her, her eyes locked on the fake target, like it was the only thing left in the universe. The sounds of her fists hitting the armored chest echoed across the empty room like drums, but even the noise could not drown the memory of his voice. The way it had wrapped around her like silken smoke, the way it had touched her instincts like fire to dry grass. She needed to forget, she needed to fight back, 'cause the more she let the bond grow, more she feared she would not be herself anymore. She trained harder, faster, longer than ever before, her body covered in sweat, her muscles burning, but her thoughts kept drifting back to him, back to his words, his breath, the calm strength in his voice. She hated it. She hated how it made her feel safe, how it made her heart race without fear, how it made her want to listen, not because she was ordered, but because she needed to. The AI voice broke through the silence, softly reminding her to rest, but she ignored it and kept going, kicking, slamming, flipping the next bot that approached, until her arms trembled and her breath came in ragged waves. "This is weakness," she growled. "This is not who I am." But a voice inside her head whispered back then, "Who are you now?" Later, in her quarters, she stood under cold water, letting it run down her fur, washing away the sweat, but not the feeling, not the pull, not the bond that refused to be broken. She told herself it was just biology, old code in her blood, but the way she remembered his eyes, the way he looked at her, not like a creature, not like a soldier, but like a person, like someone he saw. She dressed in silence, grabbed her datapad, and began scanning old Niari texts, ones she had never read before, because they were too ancient, too wild, too soft. They spoke of heartlines and echo calls of bonds formed without touch, of warriors who followed voices across stars, of instincts that knew before the mind could catch up. She threw the pad across the room and let out a sound between a growl and a cry, her claws tearing through the air. Then came the soft chime at the door. She froze. She knew it was him. She knew by the way her heartbeat jumped, by the way her ears lifted, by the way her breath slowed. Without trying, she waited, hoping he would leave. He did not. After a long moment, she opened the door, and there he was, standing calm, hands behind his back, his face gentle, not demanding, not pushing, just waiting. "Can leave if you wish," he said, voice low and smooth. Like always, she stepped aside, her voice dry. "You are already here." He entered slowly, looking around but saying nothing, just breathing, just being. "Why are you here?" she asked, not with anger, but with weight. "Because you are here," he said, "and I thought maybe you needed someone to listen." "I do not want comfort," she said sharp. "Then I will not give it," he answered, "but I will be near." She sat down, arms folded, body tense. He sat across from her legs, crossed eyes steady. "I feel like I am losing control," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe you are," he said, "or maybe you are finding a new one." "I do not want this bond to rule me," she said. "It will not rule you," he replied. "It will change you, but change does not mean chains." She looked away, jaw tight, tail curled around her boot. "I trained to be alone. I trained to protect. I trained to resist, and yet here I am," he said. "And here you are, still strong, still sharp, but now open." She stood suddenly back, straight eyes burning. I will not be your pet, your shadow, your slave. You are none of those things, he said softly, and you never will be. She walked to the window and stared out at the stars. Then tell me what I am. He Rose walked to her side, but kept a careful distance. Who are Rylan, a warrior of the Nyari, born of strength, shaped by fire, guided by honor, and for some reason your path and mine now move as one. She closed her eyes and let out a slow breath. I want to fight this, then fight it, he said, but do not lie to yourself. In the process she opened her eyes and saw her own reflection in the glass, and in it she did not look lost, she looked alive. The voice had not broken hurt, had awakened her. The ship shook hard, alarms screamed, red lights flashed across every hallway, and the sound of tearing metal echoed like thunder through the bones of the Ark Voyager as Relena sprinted through the narrow corridor. Her heart pounding, and her claws ready. The power grid had failed after a surge from the planet's magnetic field, a rare pulse that broke the outer shell and sent half the systems into panic. And now a fire burned on Deck 7, and a man was trapped behind a sealed bulkhead. Leoshi had heard the call over the comm line the moment the AI said his name. Her legs had moved, her body faster than thought. Not a command, not a duty, not a mission. She turned sharply at the corner, the heat rising fast, the smoke thick like fog in her throat. But she did not slow, she did not stop. Crew members shouted around her, calling for extinguishers, for help, for order. But Rylena heard none of it, only the echo of his voice from yesterday, the way it said her name, like it mattered, like she mattered. She reached the door that separated him from the fire, saw the sparks fly across the lock panel, and without thinking, she slammed her fist through the controls and ripped the panel open. Wires burning her fingers as she pulled and twisted. The door opened with a groan, and heat rushed out like a beast, but she stepped through and into the flames' eyes, scanning claws. Raised breath shallow. There he was, on the floor, a beam across his leg, his face covered in ash. But his eyes open and calm, as if he had known she would come. You should not be here, he said, voice dry but still steady. She dropped beside him and grabbed the beam, pushing with all her weight, her muscles screaming against the metal. You should not be dying, she snapped back, her voice tight with one last shove. The beam rolled away, and she lifted him, slowly wrapping his arm around her shoulders and pulling him to his feet. The fire curled around them, but she moved fast and steady, carrying him back through the door and down the hall until the med team met her at the junction, their faces wide with shock. She let them take him, but did not leave. She followed them to the med bay, stayed beside him as they scanned his wounds and patched the burns and placed cool cloths on his skin. He looked at her through half-closed eyes and whispered her name, not a question, not a plea, just a Truthrilinch sat by his side, not speaking, just breathing, her fur still singed, her hands still shaking. Hours passed, and he slept deep and still while she sat motionless, the memory of the fire still burning in her mind. Could have ended there. It almost did. She could have lost him, and the thought of that loss cut deeper than any blade. Later, when he woke, the room was quiet, and only the soft beeping of the heart monitor filled the space. He turned his head slowly, eyes tired, but alive. You saved me, he said. I did what had to be done, she answered, but her voice trembled. He reached for her hand, not with force, not with need, but with a gentle calm that melted something inside. Harry, am not just a voice, he said. I know, she said, and I am not just a bond. Then what are we? He asked. She looked at their hands, the way her claws rested near his fingers, the way their skin did not match and yet felt tied. Do not know, she said, but I want to find out. He smiled weakly. So do I. The captain came later, asked questions, gave thanks, gave warnings, but none of it mattered to Rylena anymore, because when the ship burned, when the danger rose, when life balanced on the edge of death, her choice had been clear. She chose him, not because of the bond, not because of the voice, but because in that moment she knew that losing him would tear something from her that could not be healed. She walked through the halls again later, alone, passing crew who nodded in silent respect, but her eyes stayed forward, her steps sure. She had faced fear and fire and truth. She had made her choice, and now the path ahead was no longer shadowed by doubt. It was bright with something new, something strong, something real. The stars outside the window moved like silent dancers, glowing in the dark beyond the glass, while the Ark Voyager floated through space, calm again, whole again. And inside the ship, Rylena walked with a quiet step, her mind no longer torn, her heart no longer hidden. She passed by crew members who smiled, who nodded, who whispered, but she did not stop. She had only one place to be, and only one voice she wanted to hear. The medbay door opened without a sound, and there he was, sitting upright, wrapped in soft cloth with light healing bands on his chest, but his eyes were clear and warm and full of peace. He turned to her and smiled, the kind of smile that said, I remember, I waited, I hope. Trill Na stood still for a breath, then walked forward and sat beside his bed close, but not too close. Her tail rested on the floor, curled, and "Come, you look stronger," she said. "I feel stronger," he replied, "and I think your voice helped more than the medicine." She let out a soft sound, not quite a laugh, not quite a growly. "You were learning Nairi humor," she said, "only from the best," he answered, and their eyes met again, quiet and steady for a moment. They sat without words, only the soft hum of the ship and the rhythm of their breathing filled the room. Then Elias spoke again, his voice lower, this time slower. "When I first heard your name, I did not know it would matter. I did not know it would feel like something old, something familiar." Ilona looked down, her hands resting on her knees, her claws retracted, her muscles relaxed. "And when I first heard your voice," she said, "I thought it was danger. I thought it was a test, but now I know it was something waking up inside me. Not control," he said, "not fear." She answered, "Something deeper." He reached into the small drawer beside his bed and pulled out a folded paper Nairi script, written in soft green ink. "I asked the AI to help me find one of your old poems," he said. "This one was written by your ancestor from the Ilnar clans." He handed it to her, and she opened it slowly, her eyes scanning the lines, her fingers trembling. It spoke of a time when voice met soul, and two paths became one, not through force, not through fire, but through choice and sound and trust. She looked up, tears she would never show pressing behind her eyes, and she said nothing, but he knew he had done something right, something Rilu could have run. He said, "I tried," she replied. "Could have stayed silent." "I did, but you chose to come back," he said. "You chose to save." Marilena nodded once. "I chose because I could not choose anything else," she said. They sat again in silence, not empty, but full, with something growing between them like a root deep under the ground, ready to rise, ready to bloom. He reached out slowly, letting his hand rest near hers, not touching, not pushing, and after a moment she moved her fingers, just enough to meet his, and the bond became more than sound, it became real. Later that night they stood together on the observation deck, where the stars felt close and time felt slow, and she leaned against the rail, her head tilted as he spoke stories of Earth. Soft stories, strange stories, stories of skies, with two moons and rivers that sang. She listened not just with ears, but with her whole body, with her breath, with her spirit, and each word he said felt like a thread weaving into her chest, into her past, into her future. And when the story ended, he said her name, Aganrilashi, closed her eyes, and answered, "Say it again." He did, and the bond deepened, not as order, not as fate, but as truth. A warrior and a wanderer, a voice and a soul, a bond not built by rules, but by trust, by time, by choice. And in the quiet of that endless night, as the Ark Voyager moved through the stars, two hearts began to move together, not fast, not loud, but sure. The old ways were not gone, they were waiting to be remembered, and now they were alive again.